Hey everybody, this is MC with MC Gaming. Today we're going to be talking about Bioshock Infinite, a first-person shooter developed by Irrational Games and published by 2K Games. Will Bioshock Infinite be able to create the same spark that Bioshock did just 6 years prior, or will it fail to reach the expectations of the fans of the series? Let's get on with the review. I have to say that Irrational really went all out with the art direction for this title. Instead of the moody, dark hallways of an abandoned underwater city, you now find yourself in Colombia, a vibrant community resting high above the clouds. The very first thing I noticed was the color difference in this game compared to the previous titles. In Bioshock Infinite, you were thrust into a world of bright colors. You would be hard-pressed to find a dull section of the game that wasn't intended to be that way. The character models for the main characters are quite impressive, though I did find there was an overuse of models for the general NPCs of the world. I had a similar issue in the original Bioshock where I thought that there should have been more variety in the enemy types and models to break up the monotony and lose the clone effect. I definitely felt like there could have been more models for the enemies here. When you fight the same man or woman in a blue suit over and over again for a couple hours, it feels like you're fighting clones, and for me, it completely breaks the immersion. The models for the special enemies were pretty interesting, though they are few and far between. In fact, I only saw a Boy of Silence one time throughout the entire game. I was pumped about this creepy looking character when I read about it before the game's release, so it was quite disappointing to only see him once. The game will often smoothly transition from gameplay to cutscene. I'm usually not a huge fan of this, but it was done so well in this title that I hardly noticed it at all. In fact, the cutscenes and gameplay are identical. I really enjoy games with art that allows it to look the same in cutscene as it does in game, as it allows for these types of smooth transitions. Colombia is definitely gorgeous, from the peaks of its monuments to the sands of its beaches, and the art style was a huge win for me. In Bioshock Infinite, you play as Booker DeWitt, a man who used to work for the Pinkertons, who is told to bring us the girl to wipe away the debt. Booker is sent to Columbia, a city in the sky, to retrieve a girl named Elizabeth who's been locked up for her entire life by a man named Zachary Comstock. Elizabeth has the ability to traverse between multiple dimensions through tears, in which she will rip open the reality of the current world to reveal another reality behind it. She can use this power to retrieve items from the other side. After finding Elizabeth, Booker finds himself involved with a group called Vox Populi, who were fighting against Comstock and his armies. Booker is forced to work for the Vox in order to obtain a ship to leave the city. Booker and Elizabeth must make their way through Columbia, supply an entire army with weapons, and defeat the armies of Comstock to escape. The story starts off pretty interesting, but by the end will leave you with your head shaking in the best way possible. The narrative of Infinite is easily, in my opinion, the strongest of the 3 Bioshock games, and will keep many players coming back just to experience the story again. This is one of the most interesting stories in modern video games, and I definitely enjoyed it. So Infinite is not a sequel or prequel to Bioshock 1 or 2, but I do feel like it should be compared to those games because they're in the same series. In the original Bioshock and Bioshock 2, you used a combination of plasmids, which were drugs that rewrote the DNA of your character to give him super-like powers, and weapons to kill the enemies of Rapture. In Bioshock Infinite, you have Vigors, which are basically the same thing as plasmids, but I found myself shooting enemies way more in this game than using my Vigors, and I couldn't really figure out why. One thing I really loved about the previous games was the ability to take pictures or videos of the enemies you were fighting to learn more about that type so you could do more damage down the line or gain a new power-up. That feature is completely missing in this game, and I think I know why. There are not near as many enemy types. I hate to bring this up again, but you were fighting mostly 2 enemy types the entire game, plus a few special enemies. I will admit that every encounter that I had with a handyman was an intense one, but I don't feel like these characters were used enough. There are enemies that throw fireballs, enemies that send crows to attack you, and a murderous founding father. But that is basically it. I said before that the Boys of Silence only showed up once. I just thought that by the end of the game, it was pretty boring shooting at the same enemies that I was at the beginning. There are a decent amount of weapons in Infinite, but not quite as creative as some of the guns in the previous games in my opinion. Some guns have alternate versions, which I also thought was kind of a cheap reskin of that weapon, when they could have just made a unique one instead. Upgrades are still a thing in Infinite, though unfortunately, there's no cosmetic change to your gun this time around. You can upgrade Vigors as well, though I found them to be kind of pricey. On normal difficulty, the game starts off quite easy and has a pretty fun difficulty curve near the middle. There's also a mode called 1999 mode for the hardcore who think they can beat the ultimate difficulty this game has to offer. In comparison to the previous two games, in terms of gameplay, I found Bioshock Infinite to be the weakest link. The story kept me interested from beginning to end, and the gameplay is certainly competent, but I didn't think there was anything revolutionary or special at all. Bioshock Infinite is currently $30 on Steam. I have 32 hours clocked in, which puts it at just under $1 an hour, and definitely worth it. The graphics are impressive and colorful. The narrative is one of the strongest in video games, but the gameplay comes short in comparison to the previous titles. But I did have a lot of fun in Colombia, and I'm going to give Bioshock Infinite an 8 out of 10. Once again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining in on my review of Bioshock Infinite. If you enjoyed the review, then make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more reviews. Leave a comment if you want me to review your favorite game or if you just want input on the latest video. Thanks a lot, everyone.
By and by is a better home awaiting in the sky.